Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sharia Way Book Club container. We've been gone for a while, but now we're back. If those of you all who might be listening to this for the first time might not even know that we're back, so totally disregard what I said and just stick with the welcome. Um, Sharia Way is a lineage space within the larger canon of the pot. And Sharia Way is a space basically for folks to remember their relationship to their faith, to the divine, outside of the constraints of like dogma and rigidity that comes with dogma. And so in this lineage space, my heart wants to hold space for, and my mind wants to hold space for all types of lineages. Um, I definitely get the sense that there was this overarching impulse that the Sharia way was connected particularly to Islam. And it is a little bit because I grew up Muslim. That is the sort of religious bare bones and the track that I kind of came from. So yes, all that to basically put forth that Sharia way is designed to help other people remember, not just myself. Nobu says in the chat, Father Abraham had many sons. Yes, had many sons, Father Abraham. I do remember that that's a song that came up early in the Sharia way days before this lineage space became a thing. So that's funny that it came up for you. Um, I was going to say something else, but I totally forgot. Oh, yes. So this book club will be taking place every single Friday for the next month and a half. And that will be here in the Broom. And all the links and all the information for you to join will be at the bottom of the episode details, as well as the time. We'll be meeting up every week at 7 p.m. Louisiana time. Um, And again, thank you all for being here live. And thank you all for being here. If you're listening on the podcast, I really appreciate it. Um, so, yeah, we're going to dive right in. The book that we're reading is Angels Unveiled by Hisham Kabbani. And we read the first 3 chapters. And I just kind of want to hold some space and just kind of see where everyone's at, not only with the text, but just sort of to check in with everyone.
We're kind of having Hi everyone.
Hi.
We're kind of having our own conversation, Nobu and I in the chat, just checking in, but to bring it to the like the common conversation, the led by Huda. Um I didn't get to preview the book. Um I would just want to introduce myself real quick. My name is Zoya. You can call me Habiba or Zoya, whichever resonates. And I'm an anthropology student, so I really like to get to the core of things, how meaning develops, the layers behind things, and I'm a very open person, so I look forward to this.
Thanks, Zoya. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for introducing yourself too. This should be really fun because this text is about angels, and there is a particular context. Thank you, Nobu. Nobu just put the link to the text that we're reading in the chat, so definitely feel free to check that out. I also pre-read the chapters on YouTube, so if anybody wants to get the link for that, just let me know, and we can go from there. But yeah, I kind of want to just start off and maybe just ask folks what their impression, what their experiences are before we even dive into the text about angels. Any experiences you feel comfortable sharing about angels, what the cosmology or the worldview that you come from says about angels. And I'm gonna just kind of take a step back as the hostess with the mostess of this space to hold space to hear what other people's experiences are all about.
What's up, everyone? This is Nobu. Thanks for introducing yourself, Zoya. I'm, I guess I just want to say hello to like some new members. So, I guess I could say I'm Nobu, and I'm one of the gardeners in the broom, which is sort of like the larger container in which Sharia way is like one of the lineages. Um, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all. Um, and what up? Okay, so angels. I feel like there's lots of really juicy stuff about angels in like various threads in the broom, so I'm just gonna like drop a few of them. Well, I'll drop a few of them after I'm done talking because I have to like go find them and link to them. Um, but I guess my own experience with angels, without like dropping too much like of my own lore, for now at least, I'll say that I feel like I have a couple of like angelic beings which like I work with in my like through my body as a channel. And I also feel like they connect to like vaster beings. So I tend to kind of think of like um angels as like you could say like sub bodies of vaster bodies, just like my hand is part of my arm. I feel like maybe you could say like Raphael, for example, the Archangel Raphael is like a part of like the star Polaris, for example. Or you could say like the Archangel Gabriel is part of the star named Arcturus. Um,
Mhm.
and I feel like in general, I tend to work with angels in, um, let's say, yeah, I've said before, like angels are sort of like a scaffolding layer connected to the heart space. But
Mhm.
that to me is like different from working with angels like in my headspace or in my like womb space. Um,
Mhm.
and then sometimes I connect to them in the heart space, but then sometimes I connect to like say Polaris with my whole body, and then
Mhm.
I'll just like zoom into the heart and connect to like Raphael, or
Mhm.
like, I'll connect to like Mikhail Jibril, or like Mikhail uh, Gabriel with my whole body, or sometimes I'll connect to them just in my heart space. And they usually, I feel like I work with angels when I'm like negotiating, kind of like quote, like matrix unquote concerns, like taxes and like jobs and like car parking space. I've heard, I feel like I don't know if it's like being in the broom, but I've definitely talked to people who are like, I work with angels exclusively when it comes to negotiating traffic or finding parking.
Mhm. I've heard that.
Um, yeah, so I think it makes sense, and I'm not sure if like they go into this in the book, but I tend to think of like angels as like the pillars of um like the social systems we've built a lot of the
Mm.
time, or like they have kind of like access to the social systems we've built.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like the way I think about angels. But yeah, um, I'll get off the mic for now. Thanks for uh, hearing me.
That was awesome. Thanks so much, Nobu, for kind of just anchoring us or giving us a taste of like what your cosmology and what your like cosmovision, how it considers angels, how it makes space for angels, how you collaborate with them. That was like pretty sick. So I really appreciate that. Um yeah, I'm kind of curious, like how do if anyone feels like sharing, definitely down to hold space for that. If anyone wants to share like how they work with angels. I'm going to read out what Adam says in the chat while I wait for anyone else to share. Adam says it's funny, Nobu, because this text talks about the eight angels that are the pillars of the throne of God. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, Nobu says that pillars are an interesting architectural feature. I feel like it signifies bridging densities of reality from the floor to the ceiling. Yeah, that is really descriptive. Absolutely. Like there is a part of me that especially like kind of as somebody who also is a gardener in the broom, who's kind of like holding this like metaphysical container or this metaphysical garden. There is a part of me that has this like lens cultivated where when I look at texts that is like that are about, let's say, angelology or something more esoteric, um, I tend to have this lens kind of built in that's like that sees things like as a practitioner. And when I think about angels and when I think about like the current context of not just the text but like culturally, how people speak about angels, like, oh, that's an angel number, or like I have a guardian angel necklace, to me speaks to like angels not being as esoteric as I would like maybe perceive them or want them to be. So there is and was a part of me that's actively engaging with this book from a place um of let's say like esoteric curiosity, right? Like the question I asked isn't like, do you guys like angels? It's like, oh, are angels like a spiritual energy you're familiar with? And is it an energy that you feel that you've been in collaboration with, which I feel has a different texture than just like, do you like angels or are angels good or bad? Let's say. Um, does that make sense for y'all? Awesome. I also see that Julie is dropping some threads. Nobu's dropping some threads that just kind of really speak to how the lore and the canon that's already been built into the broom. Some of the conversations I have been a part of in the broom that regard angels and angels from a bunch of different lineage perspectives. So I just want to say, yeah, like we might be reading Angels Unveiled from this really like beautifully woven Sufi perspective, which I really appreciate. But I just know that in my containers, I have more space um, to hold for other lineages as well. So yeah.
I wanted to hop on here to share a bit of um, what I know. So there's not too much I know about angels. By the way, please don't mind my voice. I work in a daycare and my voice changes seasonally. Let's say that. um, but yeah, I don't know too much about angels. I know there's different types of angels. There's different people. There's different people. There's different entities that have different essences or different roles in proximity to God. That I do know. But I feel like in terms of differentiating between entities that um, are angelic or they have angelic properties, but they also have other, I don't know if it's called properties, if that's the right term, but they have other, in terms of the personality of an angel, is that a set in stone essence slash personality, or is that like more vivid and fluid? That's something I'm curious about. And I really resonate with what Hota said about like sitting with a theory, seeing how it sounds, and like looking into it. And at the same time, seeing like in a day to day life, the idea of channeling an angel or embodying the understood essence, or even in my Islamic tradition, there's the concept of tawassul, which I would like to, I'm hoping to introduce in this call. Yeah, I'm trying to see how these different things weave in, and these are the things that are coming to my mind right now.
Absolutely. Habiba, thank you so much for kind of just adding. I really loved what you spoke to about like properties. I think properties is a perfect word, as far as like even just the idea of embodying like an angelic essence on a particular day. Um, and yes, there is a question in the chat if you could type out the term that you mentioned at the end, because I think I and other people probably have questions about it. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I have some notes written. I can type those in the chat real quick as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Love how that's branched out. Like we have a whole nother like container within this container that's like schooling us. So thank you. Oh, I love that. Um, oh, yeah, curious if there's anything else coming up for anyone. I'm kind of just holding space right now. Mhm. Yes. Yes, we have the etymology of tawassul shared in the chat. And I'm going to read just a couple of the verbs. So tawassul, um, the root of it, wasala, means to arrive and to connect. The verb tawassala, yatawassalu, number one, can mean to obtain access to someone, something through friendship. Two, to be united by friendship or love. Three, to be joined, be coupled. Four, when you construct it with a couple of different prefixes, it means to get to or to reach. And it also, number five, means to obtain by stratagem. Mm, wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. Nobu says in the chat, I'm meditating on number five, which is, quote, to obtain by stratagem. He also says, feels like transactions that can be halal or less so, like parking. Yes, like this. So if I'm understanding correctly, like this interaction with divine energy, um, that can be like mutually beneficial or maybe not. Is that kind of like what you're gesturing to? Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking about how, like, I know some practitioners or some people in the spiritual world have altars, for example, and how their altars are kind of like an example of kind of like a deity relationship or a relationship that they're building with some sort of aspect of spiritual energy, and how like that altar will stand there as like a representation of like that mutual exchange. Um, and then I'm also thinking about, yeah, like an example where like Nobu spoke to like a less, generative exchange where you're maybe like praying to a deity to get like the best parking spot at work every day, which is totally fine. This is 100% not a judgment from myself. But again, we're talking about like mutually beneficial relationships, not, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess mutual beneficial is my turn of phrase at the moment. So yeah.
Can you hear me? Just checking if my mic is working because I don't. Yeah, no, I was for a second. I'm like, yo, hold on. I think it's good. You can hear me, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think its positionality is important. Where I'm like really, I feel like every class I take gives me a different side of my degree in anthropology. It's just my bachelor's. And so I've taken like a history of anthropological thought. In anthropology, I've defined it in the past, but it's if I really want to boil it down, which it cannot be, but if I had to, I would say it is the study of meaning making as it relates to humans and human evolution. And it has subsets. So there's linguistics, there is medical or biological, there is sociocultural, and there is archaeology. So we talk about positionality, and as it relates to this word tawassul, yes, it's an Arabic word, and bless the viewing of the etymology. The wasila is a word that comes from wasala, which is the root letters. And so wasala means holding on to something or a means of nearness. And so the concept of tawassul is not a concept that is often spoken about in Islam. Why? Because as it relates to positionality, I am a Shia Muslim. A Muslim that there is politics related to that. We're not gonna get into divisiveness because it does not resonate with me to focus on divisiveness. But as it relates to tawassul, it relates to holding on to the faith of Islam by holding on to the Quran and the Ahl al-Bayt. And so the Ahl al-Bayt are not all the Ahl al-Bayt means family of the Prophet, but it's specifically the family of the Prophet, which I don't want to be controversial in that because people get heated even within Muslim discussions. But it's this idea that according to Shia epistemology, the 12 descendants of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from the family of Fatima and Ali, peace be upon them, or alayhum as-salam, they're infallible. And so there's a hadith that talk about how, for example, in different eras, like the very basic arguments for the Shia school of thought is, would it be logical that after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that Muslims would have no leader that is infallible? So if Muslims were to follow someone that's fallible, they would fall into sin, and then that would be kind of an argument against God. That's what I was explained. That's one way of framing it in terms of fallacies. I couldn't get into that. But back to the idea of tawassul, there's a hadith, and we know that there's discussions of traditions or a hadith in Islam being fabricated, meaning traditions of like spoken word of the Prophet that were transmitted. And so there is a hadith that has been wrongly translated if you look at the reading in Arabic. But it says, I have left you with two things, the Quran and my Ahl al-Bayt. If you hold on to them, if you hold on to their rope, you will never go astray. Something along these lines. I'd have to pull it up. I can paste that too. But it's this idea that they're infallible. And that's still something I am exploring in depth, because they say that they had knowledge of the unseen realms. And some of the idea of holding firm to them extends to sayings that last for hours. People say them for hours, like litanies, du'as, or supplications. And there's specific days that you can say these supplications, like even for the entire, like different days of the week. It's like an entire system within itself. But the basis of Islam, so the pillars of Islam, they're intact. The Shahada is the same. It's just this idea that to be able to really get close to the deen, to interpret the Quran, the Ahl al-Bayt facilitate this. Instead of, anyways, I won't go off topic. I've been talking for a minute now, a while. Please let me know how that sits with you. And I have digressed a lot.
Yeah, I'm curious how that lands for other people. I appreciate that, Zoya, and that just giving that context of what tawassul means from the perspective of somebody who's like centered in the faith and like who's exploring that practice. It sounds like kind of consistently, and sounds like you're engaged with it also with not only just your faith, but like your studies as well. And so for me, what was coming up is like one thing that I really appreciate about just like my time in constructing and like seeding the Sharia way is like learning about spiritual jurisprudence, or like spiritual fairness, or like ma'at, as some lineages call it, from all these like different perspectives. And I said a lot in just that one sentence. But I feel like that's what the Sharia way has brought up for me. Like, how do you kind of like function? And we've digressed from the text, which is totally fine. And then if those of y'all who really want to center in the text want to share some parts of the text in the chat, please feel free to. Like, I feel able to like hold, all those different conversations at once. But yeah, that's kind of what's coming up for me right now, is just kind of this felt sense of exploration, personal exploration, individual exploration of like what it means to live and navigate in the world. Somebody's driving by with like playing bells on their car, but it's not an ice cream truck. That's funny. So yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of curious if that aligns for you all, or if you've ever found yourself asking questions that way, like how do you live in the world as a spiritual person, or person who connects to spiritual energies and does so in a fair and balanced, or maybe mutual beneficial or equitable way. And maybe those words mean absolutely nothing to you all. So again, feel free to unmute and come off and holla at your girl.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like piecing together some of the stuff that was shared, like like tawasul, and also like um fallibility, and like the idea of like infallibility coming from being connected to something divine versus not. So I guess like what I'm piecing together is like um I guess the word halal keeps coming up for me, which is interesting because I know it tends to, I feel like people tend to think about halal and kosher as well in the context of food, because that's like the labeling you see. Like usually, like most people's exposure to halal and kosher certification is like if they're checking the boxes, or like if they're at a food cart and they have like kind of like a logo. But I think my understanding is that it applies more generally to like kind of all arenas of comportment. Um, but yeah, I guess like what I'm kind of feeling into is like halal or like kosher tawasul being um when one is like connected to the divine via another earthly um being or pillar maybe, and then also like the possibility of like bondage to like less halal sort of factors of reality. So like one could also be in like a sort of like a literal tawassul with like say like a landlord, but that landlord might have say like acquired their property by unsavory means, and that would still be a form of tawassul, but it would not be like, it would be like fallible. It would be like being connected to something which is fallible, maybe.
There's so much coming up for me. I see that Habiba has something to say. First of all, thank you, Nobu, for that framing. I also saw that Lexi was typing, so I'm just kind of holding space before I read what came up for me.
The first thing I want to say is I am so fascinated. I really, really echo what Toda said earlier about how, like, there's different lineages that relate to, like, unseen angelic entities in different ways. And I really I find it so fascinating. Like, subhanAllah, like, it humbles me sometimes. Like, it's so beautiful. But as it relates to the concept of tawassul, I think if I send a dua or two, it's gonna stand on its own, because there's a lot to that. There's, first of all, I want to acknowledge that when people look at Shias, they say that, oh, these people do shirk. What does that mean? I think that's the term to also explore. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but within it's like we know Islam is a monotheistic faith, so we believe in the Creator as the one God, the divine, emphasis on capital T and D. But I think so. There is at the very core the acknowledgement of oneness, the acknowledgement of the creator having the ultimate say and the ultimate wisdom and knowledge beyond what's in our like physical, spatial, visual constraints allow us. Like we couldn't fathom what, like as humans, we could not fathom the wisdom and the knowledge in general of Almighty God. And so the idea of the wasat is that people have different degrees of knowledge or wisdom or light, you could say. And the people of, like, even when we think of the prophets, right, we think of them based on like traditions that we have inherited or that we see in our societies circulating, but do we really know them in like the mystical components or as originally delivered,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so the idea of like reading a book, some people consider the Quran as literature like any other book,
Mhm.
right? I've explored this in a class that I had last term. And so like how I'm having trouble wording this, but who would best facilitate the reading of a tradition other than the people closest to these prophets? That's the philosophy, basically. Um, and so the as it relates to the book, like angels, the idea of tawassul, I haven't heard it related to angels, but
Mhm.
the book itself, I'm gonna read into a little. I'm gonna look into a little bit the author and see
Mhm.
what informs the writing. Um, that's my little retour.
Thank you, Zoya. Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm like, I don't think I would. Yeah, there's a couple of things coming up for me because I'm like, so many points. And I know this book club is scheduled to go for an hour, so I'm curious if you all who are here live are okay if we go like 30 minutes longer. I feel like I have to ask that just to honor everyone's time. Um, but I honestly am wondering too, Zoya, if you would like to make a thread within the Sharia way around tawassul and like, yeah, this concept of nearness, because I want to kind of hold space for you to continue to unpack that. And like, yeah, I would love to learn by proxy. Um, so yeah, and you can fill that out. You don't have to answer right now. And so I don't want to obligate you with anything, but yeah, I'm kind of just curious because what's coming up for me right now is, yeah, and I wrote it in the chat earlier about this, like, the concept of the silsila in Islam, or like this chain of revelation in at least in the particular like school of Islam that I grew up learning about, and how the silsila speaks to how revelation um works, and like how like the lineage of revelation like kind of flowed down from like one prophet to the next prophet throughout that family tree. And I actually, you know what, guys, I actually had intended to share a screenshot of that in relation to the text, because the text does speak about something you were speaking to, Zoya, about this difference in characteristics and difference in attributes within people, and you might not have made the connection, but the text did. So I'm going to kind of like do this like kind of scoop underhand basketball move and like center us in the text. Feel no pressure for those who didn't read it, because what it speaks to is I think the section that came up in was, let's see, a section titled spiritual dress, and it speaks to human characteristics, and I'm going to read from that in a second, if y'all would bear with me. My phone is also overheating, so everything on here is moving slower than I am used to. So bear with me just a moment. Okay. All right. I'm also going to find the page. Okay, so the page that it's on is page 28. Let me just make sure that I'm on the right page. Okay, let's 1 second. So it's on page In the book, it's page 10, and it's titled Spiritual Dress. And I will read the first couple paragraphs. It says, "The elements and qualities of human beings and other created objects on Earth vary according to their respective distances from the sources of angelic power. Hence, we find these differences between human beings even though their bodies are similar. This is because they differ in respect to their connection with angels. The differences are not really in bodies, but in the human being's spiritual attributes and characteristics. Human beings," I don't fully agree with this, but I'll just go ahead and read it. "Human beings carry from childhood either the characteristics of goodness and holiness or those of evil and wrongdoing." That is a very real picture of the spiritual quote unquote dress of human beings. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring this up. So it speaks to the dress being human characters, and the next sentence says, "and their hierarchies. One receives angelic power while the other does not. This is what makes one better than the other, just as diamonds excel emeralds, which are better than sapphires, which are better than rubies, all those rare jewels, but all of those are rare jewels, but they vary in excellence." And then he goes on to kind of talk about the difference in jewelry. So yeah, I kind of wanted to center us in that moment. Thanks for the screenshot, Nobu. And I kind of am wondering what you all make of this, like this different, this idea that the way that I understood it, and please disagree, I would love to hear how y'all interpreted it, but I kind of understood it as like, do human beings being kind of like endowed, super shielding with like a particular amount of like spiritual elixir. So like one lineage could have this like a percentage. This is very rudimentary how I'm seeing it in my head. Like one lineage could have like a percentage of spiritual essence to like kind of disperse among human bodies. And the grade or like the difference in people's character is like I don't want to say amounts, but I would say maybe like the elemental sediment that makes up the elixir of spiritual essence that they contain as a soul is going to vary by individuals. Please disagree. That was a very complex example.
I feel like I agree with the idea that there are different endowments and that they like condition the human vessel for different degrees of connection and also to like different energies. But I guess like what's not really spelled out in this passage or like the rest of the passage, which wasn't read also, is that like I think it's kind of implicit, but like when you're like spiritually dressed, you can like dress for different occasions, or like sometimes you might be like dressed down. So like you could maybe like have everything, like have all of your jewelry on if you're going to like the bodega or something. But then like when you're at home, you might just like be in your sweatpants or something. I don't really fuck with sweatpants, but yeah, like you could be like less adorned at home. And I think like that's kind of metaphorically speaking. Because like yeah, you could say like when you go to the bodega, like you might be like coming into contact with some like people who like you might need to shield from, right? Like people who are like stumbling into the bodega while they're like drunk after like going on a bender. So you might want to wear like maybe not gold, because I think gold would be like very opening, but maybe like silver, which would like shield, in my opinion. But then when you're at home, you don't really want to be shielded because like you're, you know, amongst trusted people. So maybe you would wear gold at home, or maybe you would wear like rubies or something like that, or maybe you wouldn't like adorn at all. And I feel like, concretely speaking, maybe like the metaphor of being at home and being completely unadorned would be like if you're like in direct communion with like your vaster self, you wouldn't necessarily feel like you have to like filter that using adornment, or even like strengthen it using adornment. But then also I feel like by extension, like if you did go to the bodega without shielding, then maybe your embodiment would be fallible.
Mm. Mhm. Ah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Zoya wants to jump in. Hop on, please.
So I kept reading this a few times just to make sure like I get the sense of where they're going with this. Um yeah, like what just came up is the ever since I was young I was always told that like the kind of the story of creation of Adam and Eve being the first humans, and that I think there is different ways of seeing the devil. So some people say he's a fallen angel. Some people say no, he was the devil, but it was wrongly interpreted. I don't know about that. But the idea that in the Quran, I think I could be wrong. I have to pull it up right now. But basically, from what I remember, purely from memory, uh, the devil had said, "Why should I bow down to a human that is made, or an entity that is made out of clay when I am made out of fire?" So that is something that came up, and the idea of us carrying from what was the sentence? Human beings carry from childhood either the characteristics of goodness and holiness or those of evil and wrongdoing. I'm putting an emphasis maybe on carry from childhood. Does that mean that we are born good or bad? I don't. I feel like we're born with a clean slate. I do think that is what Islam would say, but I do resonate with the idea that perhaps we we have think parts of our personalities that are already predetermined based on how we were shaped in the womb. Sorry, womb in the womb. Um, yeah, I'm still like sitting with everything, like trying to, not filter it out, but kind of like simmer it, feel it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought in like the creation of angels too, Zoya, because it does speak to it earlier in the chapter. But I'm like, yeah, I feel like there's also this um, way that each lineage relates to what is the substance of an angel, like what is an angel, and a couple of Abrahamic lineages I know for a fact kind of understand what angels are through the fall of a particular angel. So it's interesting. I'm just noting that for like myself and future like references. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what you guys make of that idea of this. I think in the book they relate to like how angels are created from a smokeless fire, but I'm gonna have to go up to double check. But yeah, I'm curious what y'all make of that. Oh, Julie is sharing something in the chat. Julie, do you feel like unmuting to like add or like read out what you said? If not, I can read it. Okay, awesome. For sure. Julie says she has to turn off her AC.
Hey y'all, I'm Julie. Um yeah, so in the chat I was saying I was referring to the spiritual dress passage, and I said that I feel like it speaks to channeling. And when Hoda said if I would say more, I felt like it relates to channeling in something that Nobu has talked about before, where like every day, all the time, humans are channeling, whether we're really conscious of it or not. And this is my paraphrase, but that's something that I agree with. And I feel like depending on what we're channeling it can be either encouraging or discouraging to what our spiritual dress looks like. So whether that spiritual dress is bringing us closer or nearer to like the divine or divinity, or if it's putting us further away or putting our lineage further away. Yeah.
Absolutely, Julie. Wow. Yeah, like if what we're adorning or what we're practicing with is like obstructing our connection to our vaster self or the divine, then is it spiritual dress, or is it just like spiritual noise is what kind of comes up for me when you say that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I may just jump in again real quick. So something else that I'm paying attention to right now is like the idea of spiritual attributes and characteristics. I'm reading a book that I spoke to Huda about. I'm like on page 50 of the book. It's not thick at all. Like it's not a big book, maybe 400 pages. It's online, but I'm annotating it. And in terms of like spiritual attributes and characteristics, something I am finding through this book as it relates to this this section of the screenshots is like being in a position of authority based on your spiritual cultivation. That's really what it is, like energetic hygiene or spiritual hygiene, which I have heard when I first like started exploring other forms of spiritualities, notably the New Age, which I will not. The New Age philosophy, which I don't agree with. But once again, I'm receptive and open. But in terms of like hierarchies based on akhlaq, hierarchies based on benevolence, and like through years of integrated knowledge, backed with experience and backed with like knowledge of these systems, like hands-on knowledge. Yeah, that's what comes up for me.
Yes. And what was the title of the book again, Zoya? Just for reference.
Yeah, I can paste it in the chat. I think it's called hold on. I think it's called a Divine Perspective on Rights. And it is a translation of Imam Zain al-Abidin, one of the 12 descendants of the Prophet, peace be upon him. It is it's a translation, but it's very thoughtfully written. And I'm like, imagine I read this in Arabic. It's very beautiful, and I feel like it's consistent enough, in my opinion. I will paste it real quick.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and there's this other point coming up in the chat. I'm going to mute for a second and let Adam take over. Not Adam. Well, Adam here in the room. Let's not conflate cosmologies.
Yes. Hello. Very nice to see you again back in the room. Yeah, I'm just remembering from the story of the prophets, which there's a thread in 308 about that, and I think library too. Thinking back to that when the angels were told they had to prostrate to Adam, and I had mentioned in the chat that from that version, from that story, it had to do also with like a cycle ending where the birds were the first ones that were in charge of Earth, and even the jinn had it for I think they were either six. I think there were 18,000 year cycles. I'll have to go back and remember. That might be wrong, but the cycle of angels had ended, and it was being passed over to humanity. And so that wanted to bring that into with the angel piece of like this idea of angels serving in a role of partnership with humans, but also helping them, I think. And I think for me, like to bring it back to the text, I was really just staying with that messages theme that he talked about in the introduction a lot, and this idea of God having these channels of communication, I think, through angel contact. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. And can you reference the text that you're speaking to one more time? Because I know that there was a whole like archetypal hour on it as well, and it might be fruitful for me to put that episode in this episode's details, so we might confer off of this recording. Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. And I was trying to find the thread, but I'm so clumsy with my fingers sometimes looking for this stuff. But it was a Turkish translation of the story of the prophets, and I'll pull it up again, and we'll make sure we link it. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for indulging my obsession with continuity. Yes, because I remember that container, and I also remember one of my takeaways from that was kind of like related to the question that Nobu asked in the chat about here, I'll read it out loud. Nobu says, I guess I'm curious why the angels had to prostrate before Adam versus collaboration on an equal footing. And I think that version that Adam is referencing, just to bring that context in, but the Persian sort of take on the story of prophets was almost like the first time that I had heard any version of that particular story about prostrating to Adam the prophet. That had to do with like this collaborative aspect and almost spoke to like the role that each angel played, similar to this text, like spoke to the role that each angel played in the creation of like humanity on earth. And that was super like illustrative for me. Maybe we can bring that in as like an addendum text too one day here. But yeah, there's another thing that Nobu said in the chat. Nobu also writes, I guess I can also imagine humans connecting to angels/demons and being led astray from God. And then Nobu goes on to write, and I can imagine humans connecting to angels/demons and forgetting their connection to their earth. Their earth is really poignantly said. And then Nobu goes on to say, which is normative in my opinion. And the last thing that Nobu writes on this point, it looks like, is, so I guess in the Surah above, that might happen from connecting to Iblis. Curious if you want to say more, holding space for it.
Yeah, I guess like in the surah, it's sort of implied that all of the angels prostrate to Adam and like the humans who are like serving and obeying God only, except for Iblis. So I feel like it could be implied that like if humans are sort of led astray from serving and obeying God, that they've kind of come under the influence of either Iblis or like angels which did not prostrate towards them. And I guess like what comes to mind for me is like possibilities where like I kind of think of like demon conjuring as like something that happens when humans like create like thought forms which they may use to like manage like their interactions for instance, or to like properties coming to mind, right? Like this kind of construct where we think of land as being like carved up into property in order to like mutually manage land and like separate different parts of it and, you know, like determine who has the right to do what on which piece of land. And like to me, that's kind of like an act of demon conjuring, which might separate humans from just like serving and obeying like the Holy Spirit, let's say, which might otherwise motivate their behavior in different pieces of land. So that would be something which would like cause some kind of separation. And I would say like, yeah, like maybe at first, like the construct or the demon of property is like, quote, prostrated, unquote, towards humans and like serves humans and helps them to work with the Holy Spirit. But then perhaps like it can get out of control and then obstruct people from like serving God in their relationships with land through the lens of property.
Absolutely. It makes me the way that you phrase that and also like wove that, thank you, makes me think of what you said at the beginning of this container, like angels representing, I forgot how you said it, but like social, I forgot how it was woven, but this idea that they represent artifacts of like social construction, and property is definitely one of those things for me. Social pillars, yeah. I think that that's, yeah, pillars of social systems. Thank you so much. I knew I was paraphrasing. Um, yeah, and I was like, whoa, like this, there was something about the property egregore that really landed for me because well, yeah, I'll ask. Like, I wonder why the property egregore came up for you, Nobu. And also I'm curious what that brings up for others. Mm-hmm. And so in response, Nobu writes in the chat, I guess property came up because it feels like it underlies most of social order. Adam also adds that land brings up angels of territory in the Torah. Mm, interesting. Totally. Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I'm just kind of like letting this like marinate. Nobu goes on to write, like the United Nations is where nations meet, but they can't really force what the social order is within any given nation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like that's an example of, yeah, nations is where nations meet, but they can't really force what the social order is within any given nation. Yeah. Mm. Also, hang on, I'm gonna look at some thing that Zoya shared in the chat, but my phone is acting slow. I'm gonna read what Zoya says that in response to something Adam said after I read Nobu's point. Nobu says, so the social order of any given nation is determined by what land belongs to which nation based on the egregore of property. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Which is why there's so much dispute over land and statehood. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you frame that and what you offered earlier too. Is just really kind of like standing out to me. Like there was at some point where this like relationship or like this egregore of property was um what's the word that I want to use? Yeah, like prostrated towards humanity, helping humanity, like it was helping humanity learn, and humanity was like learning through its relationship to property. But now it seems like the idea of like statehood, like property and like nationhood is kind of clogging up the way that I'm understanding these spiritual valves that could connect people to, I don't want to say like more up to date spiritual impulses because that sounds kind of new agey, but like more like authentic like spiritual impulses is the way that I'm like understanding it. Like true to like where they are, like where their 2 feet land, like in front of them. And making their like impact and like including where they are as part of their worship practice is, yeah, I think contested by like these places where like egregious ideas kind of stop people from like, yeah, engaging in a relationship with the divine that's like not only just mutually beneficial but that's like current and like responsive to where they are. Nobu goes on to write, property is transactable / fungible too. So maybe originally it was like, quote, those who steward this land own it as property, but because it's fungible, it came to pass that the people who own the property are not those who cultivate or steward it. Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. Then Nobu goes on to round out this point by saying, or people may own land as property without cultivating it or being good stewards. Absolutely. Yeah, I know examples of where both is true, like in real life, for me. So yeah, I'm curious what that kind of brings up for anyone else in the container. Wow. Mm. There's also kind of a separate conversation happening with Adam and Zoya in the chat, and I won't highlight it. I thought I was going to, but I won't. But I'm glad that it's being mentioned. But yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Nobu. Nobu says that he's going to create a thread on.
Can
Yeah.
I ask one little thing? There's something that just stood out right now. Hold on. So this idea of social pillars, because I'm still like, sometimes I'm a slow learner, and I really love that. When it comes to like material that I have not seen at all, so this idea of properties as being transactable is very, very fascinating. I don't know what I wanted to say with that, but yeah, no, I do know. The idea of humility within, because I did bring this up in the past, distinctions between humility and actually the willingness to be walked over, like what people like burdening you or quote unquote burdening, even that label might not be suitable, but the idea of choosing to be a servant of God, even if it means being passive, but choosing it versus the other extreme of being like, no, I do have an ego, right? As it relates to the self, I do have an ego. And as humans, we're very, like, we have the ability to think and to direct our life wherever we want to direct it, right? And ideologies quite literally run the world, to go off of where Nobu was going. So we can literally, we direct our lives both physically, energetically, etc. But the idea of humility as it relates to property, as it relates to angelic entities versus demonic entities, and how humility or letting your guard down or levels of recognition bring you close to God or bring you closer to people that are of good faith, regardless of their spiritual trajectory, spiritual path, spiritual lineage, or spiritual tradition. Better word. I hope that I came off right.
Absolutely, man. I'm absolutely picking up what you're putting down, Zoya. So thank you for speaking to that. Yeah, and it feels like, I don't know, please disagree, but it feels like there's a thread that's like connecting these different aspects, right? Like it seems like all these things are like not related, like angels, social pillars, the egregores or ideologies that people, I'll call them egregores that people like base their like livelihood and their paths, like their decisions between them and the divine. They base these like, on these like egregores like property, and it feels like all these things are like not connected, but to me it does feel connected. Like even demonology, like this, I've definitely spoken to people who have like spiritual practice, who work in different across different lineages, who are like ethical facing in certain ways. And I'm not doxing anyone when I say this, but I'm like, I've openly questioned these people too. Like they're pretty integrous in certain ways, and in other ways they're like, oh yeah, I've like created a deity to like do that kind of work for me, right? And like there's part of me that's like, okay, like a company, for example, like this is how my mind works, right? I'm like, a company is no different than creating a deity, but also it's like, what is that company doing? And so it's the same thing. If somebody tells me that they're creating an entity to create something, I'm gonna ask them, what are you doing with that entity, and like, where is that spiritual energy coming from? And like, sometimes I ask myself that too. This could be super adjacent, but I ask myself that too when I'm putting gas in my car. I'm like, where's this gas coming from? Like. So this idea of like questioning mutual exchange between also like not only just spiritual energy in humans, but also like the earth in humans. Reminds me of that passage in this text where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in this retelling of his relationship of revelation between him and Gabriel, Prophet Muhammad is given 2 green cloths, right? And maybe we won't get, really touch this point all today, and I'll be happy to carry this over into next week. But in this example, right? Prophet Muhammad is given 2 green cloths. One of them that, let me just make sure I have the quote right. One of the cloths has precious stones of the earth, and the other with precious stones and elements from heaven. And so there's this kind of like esoteric retelling of how like the revelation that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave him this ability to weave what I would call like heaven and earth through this metaphor. And so like to zoom out again, like if humans are in this like, or if we're in this like relation exchange with spiritual energy, property, goods and services in a way that's extractive, or the baseline of it is extractive, then I think for me, like the same way that I asked that person that I was speaking to, like, what is this entity that you're creating doing? Like, it's like kind of like asking what the spiritual intention is for you to have these 2 coils that like connect heaven and earth with each other. Like, what are you doing with that is kind of like what I wanted to ask them. And I wish that we could ask that of all like egregious systems and ideologies that take people away from braiding their connection with heaven and earth the way they would want to, like authentically. And so, yeah, I know I put in so many different references just now because I felt like I was just like rapping. But yeah, and then Adam puts in the chat that the text, the part in the text that I was speaking to, I think I'm going to read it really quickly, just so that the reference really lands. So it reads, "At the time, the archangel Gabriel brought to the prophet, peace be upon him, 2 green pieces of cloth from heaven, one of which was decorated with all kinds of precious stones from the earth, and the other with precious elements from heaven. He opened up the first cloth and told the prophet to sit on it. He handed him the second one and told him to open it. When he opened it, he received the Quran with words of light, and the secret of that tree in the 7th heaven was revealed to him. Whoever reads the Quran with sincerity and piety is enabled to enter these oceans of knowledge and light." Thanks. Appreciate that, bruh. Yeah, and Julie's echoing kind of like what I was asking, like, where is this coming from? Is this supposed to be coming from there? And does it want to? Yeah. And I think that those questions are, for me at least, I'm like, I think that, yeah, I won't make any conclusive statements, but I'm happy that you brought that in, Julie.
I think one thing that is coming up right now is also like what anchors you as you are approaching these, like any person seeking knowledge, what is anchoring them within the knowledge, if that makes sense. As in, like, there is the concept of aqidah. It's this idea of even before you find a spiritual teacher, they have to have certain basics checked. Yeah, so like references or things that guide you as you are seeking a way to be spiritual, or a way to connect to God, or a way to experience. It's about intention, I guess, and about direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think intention is part of it at some point, Zoya. Like, I even wanted to say intention, but I'm like, I wonder also too, it's like, I don't know, and maybe we'll get to it as this book club continues. But if what's coming up for me is, again, that like different degree of hierarchy, of different, endowments too that come to mind. Like, people, in different lineages have different responsibilities to different parts of their lineages as well. And I don't want to overcomplicate it. But yes, yeah. And then Nobu says, like, the seal of the prophet is kind of a reference, right? Yes. I would say it's a definitely a reference in relation to like both what we're talking about. Yeah. So yeah, and I'm like, I feel like we could absolutely continue exploring this as we continue with book club. But I'm interested in that as well. And I think that we've talked about spiritual hierarchies in the Sharia way before, and it was in reference to like Hazrat Inya Khan's The Mysticism of Sound and Music. And then I feel like now we're looking at spiritual hierarchies in this other, like more abstract way through this text. But yeah. Um, Oh gosh, there's so much that we didn't get into. I'm going to just read off my notes just so y'all know like how packed these chapters are. I promise you, like I'm not being sponsored by like any Sufi order, but this book kind of slaps. So it does. Okay, so some of the things that I wanted to talk about, didn't get to, and I'm totally at peace with, is angelic forms, how angels have no will and no desire, how they have attributes such as perfection, obedience, dedication, reflecting the timelessness of source power. There's this delineation about intellectual and traditional knowledge, angels and their influence over nature spirits and their relationship to the cosmos. Because at one point the book says that they're, even responsible for celestial cycles. Chapter 2, I had notes about different angels and what they're responsible for. Archangel Gabriel or Jibril or Gabriella is known as the giver of pearls or the giver of prophethood. He's usually the one that comes to prophets depending on where they are in their life. We talked about the 2 green cloths, which I would love to like dive more deep into, even if we do it in text. Angels in the Torah. I wrote clock that lineage T in my notes. That's hilarious. And then another thing that I wrote from chapter 3, we didn't even get to touch it. The construction of the throne, Harakiel's pardon and permission. So Harakiel, an angel, has this almost like direct conversation with God about God's own like omniscience and vastness. The 8 angels of the throne, the very first angels to have been created. And then apparently, according to this text, each angel has a job, which is like they consistently pray over humanity. And I would love to get into that. And again, maybe we can do so in text. But yeah, there was a lot of notes. Zoe says, so homework was chapter 1 through 3. If you want to, I'll share the YouTube link where everyone can like, I know like sitting down and reading is really hard with everyone being super busy in life and so I will share a YouTube video where I've already read it out loud for y'all. You're welcome. Yes, and Nobu says giver of pearls in relation to Gabriel, perhaps as a metaphor for wisdom codes. I say yes, because in each, I think the particularity of like pearls and wisdom codes with the Prophet Muhammad and the miracle, right, is like he couldn't read or write when he received revelation. So yes. So yeah, I think it would definitely relate to the wisdom codes for sure. Okay, guys, I want to hold space to see if anyone has any other questions. If you've been listening to this discussion, thank you so much. This is kind of like an intro discussion. And honestly, I love the vibe. I don't know if things will get more academic as the or as the book club goes on. So just stay tuned or join if you're curious about it. But yeah, for those of y'all who are here live, holding space for any other questions. Absolutely. Oh, yes. And this point of fallibility, I don't want to let that fall by the wayside. Thank you. Nobu says, oh my God, yes. Okay, sorry. These links that are being threaded, I'm sincerely like juiced by this. Nobu says, yeah, we could also get into the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his scribe being fallible, which comes up in Salman Rushdie's work. Oh boy. Yes, indeed. Okay, so many things are coming up for me, and I'm going to hold them outside of my field with respect to this container. Thank you so much, Nobu, for that reference. Adam says thank you. All right, thank y'all so much who joined asynchronously. I'm gonna let people go. I'm gonna let Craig go. And yeah, I just want to welcome you all to support the Sharia way through either making a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee or by joining and being a contributing member to the Sharia way, which is going to give you access to the Discord, benefits to like me reading the chapter out loud for you. Access to the free PDF that we're reading. There's lots of perks. And so feel free to click the link. If you want to support the Broom Radio, we also have a Buy Me a Coffee page, buymeacoffee.com/thebroomradio/memberships. If you want to be a member, if you would like to make a one-time donation to the Broom, there's also a space to do that as well at the bottom of this episode. And I just want to say shukran to everyone who tuned in. Talk to y'all soon, and peace.